and supported by our No Filter. I want to welcome everyone today to what I anticipate to be an amazingly exciting topic, which is around the work from home new business model and how it's impacting businesses and how things are going. I am honored to be the host for today's podcast, and joining me are some great guests who have great perspectives from different industries and different sectors that can help contribute to the talk. And this is going to be an open mic. We're going to go around to the group, but first of all, I want to thank the participants for taking, out of their busy schedules to come and join with us and talk about this topic, which I think we got a great audience who is keenly interested to hear about our perspective on what's going on in the industry around work from home and how businesses are adapting to support this new business reality. So joining me from Subspace is my co-host and chief product officer, Mohammed Nizarati. Mohammed, you want to say hi to the folks on the event?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, David. I'm happy to be able to discuss how Subspace is helping work from home scenarios, and excited to have all the guests with us today to discuss this topic.
Awesome. And with us, we have a great lineup to help support this discussion. So we've got Michael Floden from Continuum, the CEO of Continuum Global Solutions. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Also, I would like to invite two good friends who come from an organization that I just left about 6 months ago, Avaya. So we've got Mr. Driscoll and David Ballins from the Avaya Federal team. How are you guys?
Good. Doing well, David. Thank you.
I love your office. I love that background, right? You're a technology company by default. I love that. Great impact. I also want to thank Mr. Colin Hales for joining us. He is the COO from EdgeWorks and a strategic partner of Subspaces in Canada, working in the banking, financial, all over the place. Colin, thanks for joining us.
Dave, thanks for having me. Thanks to you and the Subspace team for the invitation.
No, our pleasure. We appreciate you being here. And finally, a good friend of mine, long person I've worked with in the past, Mr. Joe Manuel, the founder of No Filter, our host for the event and a strategic Subspace partner. Joe, thanks for being part of this today.
Yeah, thank you, Davide, and thank you, Mo. Thank you both, actually, for hosting this event, and we're excited to be a part of it. And then I have to say, though, that the Avaya team wins the best work from home environment. That's an impressive.
That's a nice house.
Array of technology behind you there. All I have is a little DOCSIS modem in my office.
Well, I am a little offended with the jerseys in the background, but I'll accept it today.
It's all good, buddy. It's all good.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
I live in the past, obviously. Yeah.
There we go. Awesome. So anyway, listen, guys, I really want to get your perspective on this. My thought process was this when I first joined Subspace about how this work from home was not a temporary element. It's something that we're going to see long term. And it really goes back to what happened and how people reacted, and now what's continuing to happen and how things have changed since pre-COVID. So in COVID, when it hit, what we saw, from my perspective, was this sort of immediate knee-jerk reaction. I couldn't go to the office. What do we do? All of a sudden, our whole workforce wasn't in delivery centers. They were or in offices. They were working from home. And I remember from our perspective, where I was working at that time, we really didn't have a strategy. People went home and we just tried to break fix and support it. What did you guys, I'd love to get everyone's perspective, how you dealt with sort of the unexpected. Everyone talked about work from home, but it was always a small portion, future roadmap element. And all of a sudden, smack, it became reality. I would love to get everyone's perspective, how you saw the market adapt or what they did during that time during COVID. Maybe I'll start off with Michael from Continuum. You as I can imagine yourself, right, as a business process organization. How did you guys deal with it at the moment? And what was
it's a great question, man. And it's something that I think all of us in this sector dealt with, where one day we were at the office, the next day people were, like you said, at home. We've got about 17,000 people around the world in, Europe and Asia, South America. And, one afternoon, they basically picked up their PCs off their desk and went home. And they're still there to this day. I mean, thanks to our partners at Avaya who helped us get there for sure, with some secure connections and making sure people are up and running. But look, we're probably just a little over 50% work at home right now. We've got some clients who want to come back to the office, and a lot of clients who are saying it works at home, so stay at home. I think we'll probably end up with a few more people back on site at the end of the day, but it's here to stay. We've had to shore up and harden a lot of our infrastructure to make sure we're secure in our work at home environment. Make sure people can get access the right data within a secure environment. We've established logistics center up in Indiana to make sure we can distribute, return, and refurbish all that equipment. We do have some turnover, unfortunately, but to recycle all that equipment and keep people running, it's a heavy lift for our folks.
I can imagine. Yeah. And then, Colin, you were dealing with a lot of like banks and carriers. What did you see when COVID hit? How did these guys adapt? What did they do?
Well, I think first of all, it was a lot of panic. You got tens of thousands of people in offices and branches and key locations, and now they're all at home. And that network that they built and hardened and secured is no longer needed, and everybody's connecting from home. So definitely raised a lot of security challenges. They definitely had to jump really quickly to put in place security, but also solutions that would allow users to connect. They're now, I think, transitioning to work from home for a lot of those roles that didn't really require people to be in the office, like call center. A lot of our telco and financial customers have moved call center to home, out of call center locations. And so that required a whole lot of investment. And I think it's still work in progress, which I think is a great opportunity for a lot of us on the phone to help those customers transition.
Yeah, I think, you bring up a good point, is that when it first happened, it seemed like, what do I do short term to just make this work? And short term became 2 years. Now we actually, what you're seeing now is now people have to figure out what's the strategy, because even security is like, I just slap in the security. It was based on the old process. Now I have a new process. Is that the right security? Like these are all topics that, we see popping up everywhere. Dave and Mike, you guys are unique because you're in like the federal government space, right? You're dealing with entities that may have a different sort of, I'll call it KPI related to the workforce versus, let's say, the enterprise side. What did you see in the enterprise space? Was it like more aggressive, more conservative? What was sort of the trends you saw?
Well, I would say honestly, pre-COVID, there were a lot of businesses that were looking to telework. They wanted to save on their real estate market. They wanted people working from home. They were dipping their toe. They were trying to close offices. And what they discovered was it was a lot harder than they thought. And the biggest thing was that last mile. They discovered that people had connectivity issues. It was very hard to troubleshoot. So they waffled about, do they go, do they not go? And then all of a sudden when COVID hit, the decision was made for them. They couldn't waffle anymore. So now they're struggling through the pains of getting through all the problems, but also, like you guys say, hardening their systems to give them remote access.
Right. And maybe you want to cover off some of the security issues as well. I mean, it's different in the federal space.
It is very different in the federal space. Security is a premium. In the federal space, things like split tunneling, using SBCs with voice over IP is a no-go. Everything is hardened on VPNs. It is a different animal. And then when you start talking about, I can't segregate traffic from the laptop or with a hard phone, and I have to have all the traffic because it's VPN tunneled, encrypted, makes it a much more difficult process.
And David, there's tremendous pressure that in the federal space that you don't see in the commercial space. And I mean, just look at the customer that we serve. They cannot go to a competitor. They cannot find another access point for the services that they require. If you're dealing with an agency, you must go to that agency. If they cannot provide accessibility for their constituent caller, our accountability is completely different than the commercial space. If I don't like doing business with one financial institution over another, they're not providing me with the service that I need, I can go somewhere else. If someone in our constituent community doesn't like our service, we're in front of a congressional committee. So there are no options for us. We must deliver, or our failure is catastrophic.
Yep.
Wow. So it's a lot of pressure I'm assuming that at that point, there was a lot of pressure on how do we fix that problem quickly?
Tremendous pressure.
Well, not only that, you also have a user population that are very set in their ways and they struggle with change. You have a user population that wanted to work from the office. They were built that way. And then all of a sudden, a request that these people work from home, where it's reverse in the enterprise market, where people want to work from home. It's a little different of an idea
Right.
where people are. I go to the office, and all of a sudden, I need to work from home. Now you want to use my internet, or you want to use my cell phone, or you want to use my connectivity. That's a whole different dynamic that was never broached by the government.
Planned. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
listen, I agree with you 100%. That's a great point because even in the enterprise space, the whole thing of I'm using my personal internet, like think about the transition now. I'm now getting people to work from home and it's personal assets combined with corporate equipment and what gets funded, not funded, how does it work, how do I split, like it becomes a debatable question. I think obviously in the federal space it's even more, but I think across the board it becomes how do we deal with this. Joe, I'd love to get your opinion because when COVID hit, you were really deep with a lot of different cloud companies, and then you went into this sort of startup. What did you sort of see from a cloud opportunity?
So I was CEO of a video conferencing company, and we had 4,700 customers who basically overnight, all went home because they needed to flatten the curve for 2 weeks. So I don't know how that curve is doing right now, but what I found interesting was, for the most part, in a lot of the customers that we supported, there was departments that already work remotely. So marketing, sales, for the most part, we're used to this hybrid environment. Obviously, sales folks are on the road all the time. What was interesting and what we needed to support were all of a sudden the accounting department, the logistics folks, the shipping people, the operations folks, that would typically go into a warehouse every day would still have to keep the lights on, right? The accounts payables people still had to, send invoices out. And so above and beyond having to work from home, and we obviously viewed it from a video conferencing perspective, there was a collaboration element that got accelerated. And then there's this automation that, if you were still printing invoices and sticking a stamp on them and putting them in snail mail, and you said, yeah, I got to automate that. Well, guess what? You had to automate.
You're automating it, yeah.
Right after you realize this isn't going to last 2 weeks. So we saw this amazing sea change of digital transformation. I read this one book that talked about how during COVID, we basically are doing all the things we were planning on doing, but we did 10 years worth of digital transformation in 3 months, right? We were forced to do it. We had no choice, right?
It was funny because Deloitte had made a statement that it forced a time machine to the future, right?
Yes.
Everything that we talked about, all of a sudden, boom, it was
absolutely,
right now in present.
Absolutely. We accelerated the things that we knew eventually we were going to be doing anyway. And then, we ended up selling High5 during the pandemic. I sold the company to Dialpad, and I got to do a transaction where we met one time in person just before we closed. I live here in Half Moon Bay. We met outside at the patio at the Ritz-Carlton just before we closed the transaction. But the entire transaction, all of the due diligence, everything happened virtually. And everything just happened without actually meeting each other. And so it made me realize what's possible. Now, I certainly missed the human interaction. We never had the closed dinner, by the way. The bankers and Macquarie still owe me the closed dinner because we couldn't get together at the time. But what was possible was the ability for us to interact. And so the technology, obviously Zoom accelerated beyond control, and they've come back down to earth. But going beyond video conferencing, obviously that was our main area. I was just amazed at how all the other departments within an organization that didn't use video all of a sudden had to start using video. And then once you start using it, this whole concept of, hey, maybe I don't have to go into the office every day. And I think this is the phase where we're at right now. I kind of like, my gig at the house with my Comcast connection, my own espresso machine where I make my own coffee. I don't spend 2 hours a day in my car going back and forth. So I find myself going out in the wild once or twice a week. But for the most part, I work at home, and I'm just so much more productive.
Yeah.
On the dev side, it allowed us, now at No Filter, like we are a very small company, but we are global in nature. We have development teams in Croatia, in Serbia. We have support in South Africa. We have our marketing folks in these remote locations called Canada, Davide, that you could relate to. In Western Canada, we have our marketing folks, and then we're here in Silicon Valley. This whole concept of a virtual team. I mean, I actually, we've been doing this for 2.5 years. I've never met my dev team. I still haven't met them face to face. So I plan to do that this summer, right? But this is what's the world has become smaller because of it, and the technology was always there. I think what got forced upon us was the changes in business processes and us rethinking things, because we just didn't have a choice, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So, and I appreciate it. That's good perspective on what happened. But one of the things I'm seeing now is, as everyone sort of rushed to do it, I think it proved the thesis that we don't all have to be in one building to operate a successful business. In fact, globalization, global resources, collaboration was a reality that we could all tap into. And what you're seeing, one of the things, the stats I saw, which I thought was really cool, during COVID, it was like 70% of the workforces in North America were working remotely. Okay. And we always say work from home, but they're saying in 2022, if you look at that 70%, 42% have switched to hybrid, while 39% will still work remotely. Meaning, to your point, people still want to have that human interaction, but they love the convenience of working from home and the productivity of working from home. It proved itself out. So this reality of it's not work from home, it's work from anywhere, which is even more complicated, by the way, where the person's not physically in an office at a computer. He's now working from anywhere. I was actually on a discussion, and this company told me, listen, we have millennials every quarter. They actually go to a different place in the world and just work from there because that's how they like to do it. So this work from anywhere is this new reality that's happening. And, I think it's fascinating because now we have to strategically put a plan together on how we solve this long term. This is where I want to go to you, Mo. Mo, what are your thoughts on this sort of thing? And where do you see companies sort of building a strategy to sort of support this new thing?
You're right. It's interesting. When you're talking about millennials, I have a daughter who started working in 2021, and her friends started in 2020, and many of them have never been inside of an office, have never actually worked professionally after graduating college, and have now worked a year or two in this environment. And for many people, it's a new reality that they're adjusting to. But for some, it's the only reality that they've known. So as time goes on and more and more people get used to working in that fashion, it becomes even harder for people to actually go back into an office environment and sit. And it's sort of strange for them. I think a lot of people enjoy the productivity. They call it the productivity, but I also see it as a little bit of freedom that people have. Like if you have time between meetings, or if you don't have a task and you have 20 minutes and you want to just go sit in your backyard under the sun for a few minutes, then you can do that. You can actually catch a more relaxing break and not feel guilty like you would in an office, walking outside and sitting on a bench for a few minutes. So I think that freedom also is leading to what sort of is driving the productivity for people. From a technology perspective, I think what Subspace is doing is trying to make people's work from anywhere experience be like working from the office. As Mike said, when you were in the office, you had IT, connect in and, manage all of those environments for you. But with a work from home reality, you don't have that any longer. So people are joining in from anywhere. And it's important that they have experiences in terms of connectivity and access to technology and capabilities that they had in the office, so they can be as efficient as they could be without, again, like the Fed team was stressing around security, without giving up any security. I think security has become a lot more important for us. We're seeing geopolitical events in the world, and these geopolitical events actually, raise the nature of state actors potentially taking down even small and medium-sized businesses who are probably under the radar of most cases. But you're no longer you're no longer imperviable to getting attacked, even if you're a small company. I was having lunch with a small company up here in Toronto a few weeks ago, and they were launching a partnership with a large German conglomerate, and they were concerned. They said, since Germany is like now supporting Russia, we just don't want the press release of our collaboration to now raise our profile to a place where we get potentially hacked through state actors. So the security dangers are actually becoming much more relevant for people, even small businesses dealing with this quite a bit more. So I think what we're doing at Subspace is trying to add all of those layers. And with respect to like our engineering and product teams, and David, yourself, you have barely met anyone in person since joining Subspace. I've been to our office in LA once last year, and we actually shut the office down because we had literally 4 people coming into the office, and it was a big office that we're spending a lot of money on. It just didn't make any sense. It's much more effective for us to have WeWorks that we pop into and have our team gatherings from time to time, rather than have a fixed location where you're having hard assets and real estate charges. So I think the work from home is quite an interesting challenge, and as it goes along, convincing people who've never actually worked in an office now to come in and work in an office, I think will be even harder.
Interesting. So, I want to take that to, I'm going to go to Mike and Colin, because you guys probably have bigger concerns. So, from a cloud and technology company, it makes sense. Like, okay, work from anywhere, easy to do, collaborate. But and he mentioned the security. So, Colin, from a financial perspective, I mean, it's a new dynamic. How do they plan? How do they actually create long-term strategy to deal with this now? Because it's a lot of risk there. Like Mohammed even upped the ante, right? Like there's exposure everywhere now.
Yeah, I know. Great question. And as you know, financials are heavily regulated. They got compliance, more compliance than they can deal with. And so they're still on that journey. And unfortunately, like they're in many cases behind the times, and because of compliance, they want to see it, they want to touch it. They're used to having everything connected. So from a networking security perspective, they want it all nailed up, and they can't wrap their heads around the fact that it's really, as you said earlier, it's work from anywhere. No, somebody's not working from home. They're working from Starbucks. They're working from the beach. They're working from anywhere in the world. And so, in this new world, you have to move past the traditional network and networking security, rules and I guess architecture, and really look to new technology like Subspace, where you can solve those problems. You can connect people. They can get that guaranteed service. You can take care of tens of thousands of people connecting maybe at the same time to say their VPN, and not being able to connect unless you do things differently. So Edgeworks as a partner is very excited about what Subspace can offer our customers, our banking, financial, our telco customers. And I think it's definitely a new world, and we all have to embrace it. And we're hoping we can help our customers with these challenges.
Awesome. Michael, I'll say there's 2 Michaels here. So Michael F., you've got an interesting dynamic, right? Because you've got employees all over the world, agents all over the world. And I'm sure, it's onboarding, offboarding, and you get this work from anywhere plus delivery center. Like, what are you guys doing right now? Like in terms of strategy, long-term, what are the sort of challenges you guys are trying to address?
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge. That's the right word for it. I'll tell you that. It's a very dynamic environment. We've got, like I said earlier, a little bit of turnover. So we've got a lot of kind of people onboarding and offboarding every day across the organization. And then we've got different types of folks in the organization. So we've got a lot of agents, right, around the world that are typically working from home. And I use that word specifically because that's their home base. It does raise a whole bunch of different issues, though. And, Dave, as you and Mike were talking about kind of the federal dynamic or the way the federal employees like to work from a consistency and lack of change and everything else, our agents are kind of at the other end of that spectrum where they're very, very young and they like to work from the backyard with the dogs running around and the cat jumping on the computer keyboard. And,
Yeah.
it sets up a whole different set of dynamics when, you've got a younger person working from an apartment in New York or, their parents' basement or, someplace else in the world with a lot of different distractions. And so not everybody, was ready to work from home and kind of had to carve out a space in the living room to put a desk and figure out what to do with the kids. And, in my house, we've got a couple of people who are on calls all day long. So we have to really separate to make sure we don't, bother each other. So there's a whole different set of dynamics depending on the type of workforce we've got. Then we've got our developers, right, that are used to working alone and prefer that. We've actually gone the other way from what you're talking about. We're actually putting a headquarters location in place because we haven't had one historically. And we need a place to land. We need a place to get together once a quarter to bring clients on a weekly basis, to do the solutioning sessions, and really design those solutions we can put into place. We don't have that right now, right? So we're building a CX lab here in the next couple of months in our new location. It'll be a place for collaboration and to bring clients and to host people, which is, I'm seeing an appetite for that again, right? We talked about kind of before we got started where we are in the world and kind of what's going on. And I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a real appetite to get back out there and, and have dinner with clients, have dinner with your employees, to, Mo, to your point, to visit one of your offices, right?
Right.
It's there's a real desire to do that. So we're seeing that people trying to figure out that balance and going along with that, as as Colin was saying, there's a whole bunch of security concerns that go around it. We provide services to a number of different financial institutions, a number of different healthcare companies, right, where we've got a lot of HIPAA requirements we've got to be very, very aware of on the healthcare side. Obviously, like Colin was saying, on the financial services side, they're even more concerned about the security of that environment. So as we have all those folks accessing, very pertinent private information, we've got to be very aware of the security, environment we're in. We're always looking for new things to add to the environment, like Subspace, that can help us with that. And it's been we're just getting started on the Subspace train here, but I think it's going to do great things for us.
Oh, yeah.
David, if I could, and building off what Michael said, a lot of what we're talking about is not new. I mean, whether we call it mobility or hoteling or teleworking, I watched you 15 years ago taking calls on the go, and it looked very cool. You're very trendy. Today, the paradigm is it's almost shifted. It's about formality and about expectations. I look at Joe's background. He's established a persona for himself. We obviously have tried to provide a little bit of flair for background, but more than anything, the expectations have changed. The bar has been raised. Where I would have tolerated you being on a call with me and having some clipping, some jitter or whatnot, I would have tolerated that before. Today, the expectation is that where you are is as good as or better than your office. And Mike, I'd like Mike to go into a little bit about the Tiger team that the agency has asked him to put together around teleworking and what these new standards are. I mean, it is a formalization of what used to be a very informal environment.
Right. Again, think about the federal agencies. I know we all are talking about where teleworking fits in the corporate world, contact centers, marketing, sales, all the usual hotspots. The federal government is a little bit of everything. I have judges, I have courtrooms, I have everything that has to go home, as one example. We have all kinds of different things that have to be able to telework because of COVID. And now that we've opened up Pandora's box of teleworking for everyone, they all want a slice of teleworking, at least part-time, to be able to do the things, Mo, you talked about. They want to have that opportunity to go stand in the backyard. They want to be able to make their own cup of coffee, Joe, right? They want to have that. They don't want to be forced back to the office full time, even though they probably fit better there for what they do. Now we have to be able to deliver that. Part of the frustration with that, though, is think about it. I have to have reliable communications because I might be running a legal court case. I might be doing
A deposition.
a deposition. I might be doing paperwork, HIPAA paperwork that cannot be interrupted. I can't have clipping or popping. I got interpreters on the phone for benefits because I speak Farsi and I don't speak English. And you can't have an interpreter. I have 508 requirements for the handicap, but I also have hearing people that need to be able to hear. So I can't have video clipping. All of those things are really important. So the idea of the Tiger team is to figure out how in the world can we still guarantee the security? How can I give prioritization of service? How can I avoid the biggest thing we're not really talking about? Denial of service. We all ride on the internet. If some bad actor in a different country decides to take out or denial of service, May East, May West, something like that, how do I circumvent that? And taking it out doesn't mean to remove it, is to disrupt it just enough to cause clipping and popping and create havoc of communications. And think about trading floors, all those other things. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at this Tiger team of how do we get around those things? How do we give the level of service, again, not only for our workers, our employees, but think about Joe Public. Think about the next level. What about Joe Public that can't go into a facility, that wants to be able to get into my contact center, not via my cell phone, but I want to be able to use Skype, a web page, WebRTC, whatever it might be,
Teams.
and I need to be Teams, whatever I choose, and be able to get in and receive my services. How do I give them HIPAA services? How do I secure them? How do I guarantee them a good session? Because at the end of the day, if I have a crummy session talking to somebody, it's not the internet's fault. It's your fault. You know, that's their perspective.
That's where Subspace comes in,
Right.
David, for us. That's why we're proud to be your largest customer.
We appreciate it. We always appreciate it. You know, so that's
Nice.
great. Go ahead.
I wouldn't mind
Yeah.
just offering a little bit of a counter argument to that. Look, at the end of the day, No Filter and Hi-Fi was powered by Dolby. We use Dolby IO. Dolby runs on AWS and is HIPAA compliant, right? So taking a workload and you know, and you guys will forget more about supporting the federal government than I'll ever know, but all of these cloud platforms are now moving into secure government cloud environments with both GCP and AWS, and I believe Microsoft all have government certified data centers now that meet their compliance requirements. Accessibility requirements goes way beyond just 508A and supporting federal government requirements. This has become a concern, a societal and a moral responsibility for us to be able to give accessibility options to all of our employees, which actually broadens the workforce. So the shift to cloud, the first thing was you did the low-lying fruit thing. You did like the little startups who don't really care, who work wherever they can. But we're starting to see more and more workloads penetrate these. Like healthcare, in my mind, is probably the next big vertical that's going to be disrupted. It has to be disrupted. So we have to be able to make healthcare more affordable and broaden it out. We're seeing with state, local government is the lower lying fruit. Civilian government agencies, much easier to move to the cloud. And then obviously, the stuff that gets the DoD stuff. And I got to work on some federal government military projects. That's a whole other level. I wasn't even allowed in half the buildings being Canadian, right? So that's probably going to be the last thing that we changed. But that being said, you cannot underestimate the shift to cloud. And then you touched on something else, right? Like we gave employees the taste of what that was like to work from home. My previous job, I was at NTT. I ran a BPO practice. I had 6,000 employees in Cape Town. And we moved 6,000 employees, at merchants, to work from home. The biggest issue in Cape Town was the internet was horrible, right? And rolling power blackouts, that's still the biggest issue. But employees loved working from home, and merchants as a business not having to provide real estate to 6,000 people. I could tell you, from a financial perspective, it's way cheaper to provide secure broadband, even backup power where needed, or a 5G connection, than it is to provide real estate for 6,000 people, where you're signing long-term agreements, especially when you have burstability, where you might need 6,000 agents one day, and then 6 months later you only need 4,000, right? And the ability to onboard and offboard employees. On the BPO side, and I know, Michael, this is something you live every day. I know that we saw a huge benefit of allowing people to work from home. And the issue that was brought up earlier on who pays for the broadband, we paid for the broadband. Here's an extra $150 a month. Go up your broadband connection. Here's a new laptop. Here's a headset. Here's a Yeti mic. Here's some proper lighting. And then the last point I wanted to make that you touched on is, the dogs, the kids. It's become acceptable. It's kind of cute now, right? Like, I've got a 100-pound lab who's outside my office waiting for me to walk her. The dogs were the big winners in COVID, right? We're all home and we can all walk them more. But it's okay for a dog to walk in, or a little kid, your 3-year-old daughter, to come in and say hi to you while you're on a call. It used to be taboo not long ago, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We'd shut the door, we put signs on, I'm on a WebEx call, do not disturb. And now it's like, come on in. Oh, this is my daughter Maya, right?
I guess, Joe, it's a little different. I do understand all those things, but I look at it from a little different perspective. If I'm an employee and I live in an apartment building and everybody's working from home, and I happen to be fairly loud, I got a booming voice, and I'm talking about your medical records, and I'm talking about your social security number, or I'm talking about your financial stuff, and somebody can hear it in the other room, you got a problem, right?
Sure.
I see, and we started off with this, the pendulum. Let's go back in time. We had everyone having private phone systems, and then everybody got all excited about Centrex. Let's all swing to Centrex. And then people discovered in Centrex, my ads, moves, and changes took forever, and people swung back to private. And now there's this pendulum swing to say, hey, let's put everything in the cloud. Centrex version 2 for voice over IP. And now people are noticing, I don't like that too much. And there's some problems. We've had hacks of Amazon and Google and all the rest. So we also see this pendulum moving back, where I like the cloud idea. I just want it on my site just in case. So we see this in the constant pendulum that goes back and forth. We've gone too far this way. And I think it's the same thing with teleworking. I think it's really nice and it fits really good with people. But I can tell you, I've been on plenty of conversations in my space, and I also work enterprise customers, very large ones, that are very dismayed about a dog barking or a 3-year-old in the room and all that. And I agree. Sometimes it's very cute and it's entertaining and breaks the ice. Other times when you're talking about someone's legal rights, it's not entertaining.
Yeah.
But
I think it's very vertical specific. Yeah, to your point. Like, if I'm
it is.
Like telehealth, like I had several calls with my doctor, over a WebRTC platform at Stanford, right? And yeah, I don't want to be in a public room, or I don't want to be in an area necessarily where everyone's interrupting or listening. I got 15 minutes of attention with a specific specialist. But it beat the alternative of not having access to her at all, right? And it's not ideal. Now, healthcare is a great thing where, like, okay, so now I can go see my doctor. So yeah, I'm going to go see my doctor. But what we learned from it is there are some cases where telehealth is fine. Maybe I don't need to jump in my car and use 45 minutes and pay $15 for parking and then wait my turn and then see the doctor, so that in 15 minutes they could tell me something they could tell me over a WebRTC HIPAA compliant, platform. And I'm not suggesting that the entire world is going to move remote and it's fine in every scenario. What I'm saying was, it was always taboo to have someone walk into a room, and now it's more acceptable. And yes, but I'm 100% with you that there are some verticals. You're talking to your financial advisor, right? In banking and financing and all that. That is like, you used to meet your financial advisor. Well, once a year, he take you out to lunch, right? And tell you, oh, you get 8% this year. Congratulations. We don't need to do that anymore, right?
So I think it's pretty evident, right? That, one size does not fit all. Now, what's evident is prior, the concept of teleworking and work from home was sort of a niche concept for specific people. And what I've already seen this. I'm at the NAB show this week, and a lot of the thought process was, okay, we're going to have some high profile. We're going to give them the ability to work from home. It's only 25% of our workforce. We're going to give them equipment. We're going to give them infrastructure. It's going to operate as if they're in the office. Awesome. But the new dynamic is if I have 80% of my employees, and some of those aren't the highest expense employees, need the same type of infrastructure to now operate, we got an issue. Security, infrastructure, planning, all of that. So and then there's we don't have time to talk about it today. There's also the social aspect that impacts this, right? Remember, we've had the Great Resignation. Especially in North America, but this is globally. It is hard to retain workers. I mean, all the big players are dealing with this right now, where if I make any sort of hardline decision, everyone come back to the office, what's the risk? The risk is my competitor doesn't. And that guy has a choice. The employee has a choice and he leaves.
Yeah.
So we're in this really hybrid state. It's interesting, right? Like no one wants to make a decision. In fact, we just saw this. I mean, I thought it was interesting is what's happening in China, lockdowns again, right? So there's no one's comfortable yet with the strategy. So when you've got this sort of uncomfortable, not clear direction, what do you do? Like what are the things that you can do to sort of level set and think long term? Michael F., I want to get your perspective on this because you're running like a global entity. Like, how do you deal with this? And then I want to go to you, Mo, and get your feedback on this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I do want to just build on what Mike said a second ago. Mike from Avaya said a second ago, because it is. I agree with you, Mike. It's not one size fits all, right? And so we've got some situations. You know, my leadership call on Fridays with my executive team, the dogs come in and say hello, and it's fun and it's entertaining, and you know, I know the names of my folks, animals and kids. It's all great. But I'll tell you what, when I'm managing the environment and I've got 3,000 people supporting a client on the call center side, this is a business of minutes, right?
Yeah.
And if everybody takes an extra minute to introduce their dog to every customer, I'm going to lose money. We're not going to stay in business, right? So we've got to have that balance between when is it okay and when is it not okay, because it is a business, right? And at the end of the day, I need a certain amount of productivity out of every person, certain amount of productive minutes every hour, and we've got those targets. I think for us, it's more and we probably don't have time to dig into this a whole lot, but there's a certain amount of how do you build the right culture in a virtual environment when folks are working from home? How do you maintain that culture and maintain the motivation of those folks to sit here by yourself for 6.8 hours a day and have a headset on and be productive and drive those minutes for me? That's what we're trying to crack, right? The security, you know, the connectivity, the reliability, the bandwidth, all that stuff, super important. Got to have it. Can't work without it. But I tell you what, if people don't like their team lead who shows up on a screen like this once a day to say, "Hey, how's it going?" We're not going to get the productivity. We're not going to have the culture that we're looking for. And that's that's a whole different layer of complexity in our organization. To your point, David, it takes something different here in the U.S. to build that culture than it does in my operation in Indore or in Cebu or in Frankfurt or in Buenos Aires, right? There's different things that motivate people in those different cultures. There was a comment in the text, the chat session here a little while ago about culture, and it's absolutely true, because we'll have the standard configuration, the standard security protocols and configuration around the world, so everything's ticked and tied and secure. But if we don't get the culture piece right and the motivation piece right to keep people engaged and working, we're gonna lose it. So that's where we're spending a lot of time in the work from home model is, how do we keep those folks engaged? How do we keep them here and excited about doing this when sometimes it's tough to work from home?
Yeah. Yeah, Colin, Michael, you bring up a good point, right? Like we live in the technology world, and the old saying, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we try to answer everything with bandwidth or technology, WebRTC, but you hit something that's critically important, which is the culture of how you work. The culture of your company changes because of how we work. And to Davide's point about earlier about someone could be working, millennials can work from a beach. My digital marketing guy spent a month in Mexico, and he's just working. He said, "I got good bandwidth. I'm good. I can still do my work. Work is something I do, not a place I can do it." And if you're lucky enough that you can do that, good on you. But there's the I don't know that we provide enough managerial training to help people manage a truly virtual workforce. I think
I'll
that's
tell you, Joe.
big
I'll tell you,
gap,
Joe.
right?
It's changed,
Yep.
Joe. It's
Yeah.
really changed over the last year and a half, 2 years, right? As we moved to this environment where the historical team lead training, supervisor training, managing a team of
Totally.
20, 30
Yeah.
people, those tenets that I look back at the training we did a year ago, year and a half ago, they're totally different right now.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Great point.
Totally
Yeah.
different.
That's a great point about even the management of people, right? It's a totally different dynamic when you have the work from anywhere
Yeah.
work for. Like I have a team of 10 salespeople I've never physically met. How do I keep them motivated, engaged, and you know what I mean? And trust,
Yeah.
because you used to build that trust with those physical engagements. Now you have to supplement them somehow with this new environment. Colin, you have your workforce is all remote. You guys are sort of that hybrid. You get together, but you all work remotely. How do you guys manage it?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of customers, it was a big shock when COVID hit. But for us, we're kind of already working remotely. We're already on site with customers, at home or on the road. Like you're in a hotel room right now. I mean, that was our world. And so, I think it's a great point. You got to build that culture. You got to have the right leadership team that sort of supports and embraces and knows that just like there is no one size fits all with technology. I think the same thing goes with your people. And so understanding what motivates your team and how they like to work and being able to support those different individuals and those different, interests is important. And so, I think Mike made a great point. The training world has changed. And so online video is important.
Very good.
Um,
And let me finish up with Mohammed. Mohammed, and then I want to ask the two guys who've been sort of talking the security side, culture-wise. So there has to be a baseline. Culture only works if you can connect everybody. So how do we
Right.
deal with one, connection, and two, how do we layer in the culture to make it all work?
Yeah, sorry about that. That's
I think cultures, yeah,
You're
culture is it's multi-dimensional, right? Because you have a company culture that you can foster, you can, teach people. Like at Subspace, we've focused a lot on documentation. So our engineering teams, they document a lot, like over document, because they're not together. So one way and they're in different time zones across different countries. So one way that people can work effectively together is by, implementing things that will help you actually do that. So that's sort of become a culture for us. But the other side of culture is actually a real culture, which is where you come from and what's acceptable in the places where you are. So in North America, we're all kind of spoiled. We have big houses, we can close the door and be quiet. But in some places, there's like 10 people living in 1,000 square feet.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how do you can't close anything because there are no doors. Everybody's kind of living in this open space
Right.
together. And there's a washroom and an open kitchen, and somebody makes a coffee and that noise comes in. I was calling, my dishwasher broke a few months ago, and I was calling the call center for that. I don't know if that's one of your customers or not, Mike, but I could hear a rooster crowing in the background when I was.
It definitely wasn't one of ours then, Mo. No, never happens here.
And not much about a fire alarm, that's for sure.
Dogs, cats, kids, no roosters.
So it goes to the problem, like not everybody's in the places where we are. So we can't necessarily relate to all the problems that all the other people have. So it's important when we're designing a work from home to understand like what your company's goals are. If your company's goal is to be regional, let's say, Colin, you guys are in and around the Toronto area, you plan on hiring in and around the Toronto area, maybe expanding to the rest of Canada, but not going outside of this jurisdiction, you can have a certain expectation of how your employees will be able to work because you understand the culture here, the systems that are available here. But all of a sudden you're Mike Floden and Continuum, and you have people in like 17 different countries and different areas and different geographic situations, different geopolitical situations. And you have to kind of consider how you can design a system and a culture that can fit all of those guys. And you got to be as homogeneous as possible with respect to your services, because you want everybody to sort of be treated equally when they work for you. They don't want everybody to feel differently. So culture is an interesting thing, a good dimension. And frankly, around the technology and the product side, I'm a little disappointed that there haven't been more startups actually focusing in on solving this problem. This digital town square, that Twitter is going to become, that Joe's created now with No Filter and others. These sorts of technology events are changing the way that we interact with one another. This is before, if we wanted to do this kind of thing, we may have had a hard time to actually organize this sort of an event and pull people in from 5-6 different states and countries and others, and have an open discussion with audiences around the world. Right. But today we're able to do this because technology allows for us. So what are we going to use these kinds of tools inside of businesses to help people be always on with one another, even though they're not physically present with one another? So there's all kinds of, I think, interesting technologies that will come about that will attempt to solve these problems. But it'll be important for us not to put a myopic North American lens to the problem itself, because people aren't always approaching problems in the same way.
Yeah, and people talk about this hybrid world that we're going to move into, where, what's the new world look like? I think there are some things that we were forced into due to the pandemic that we liked and we don't want to give up. And there are other things that, if you have 10 people living in a small apartment, I want to go, by the way, we talk about that it's not a North American thing. If you're living in San Francisco, people are like renting a bedroom, right? And there's 5 people living in a 2-bedroom in the city. So that's still very much in the heart of Silicon Valley. Like, this is absolutely an issue. It was an issue at High Five when I had employees who lived in the city. But the reality is, you still want to touch base with your team. And that's one of the things we're building here at No Filter with Subspace's help, the ability to connect. Once a quarter, you want to talk to all 50,000 of your employees. And if you do that, you're probably needing 40,000 connections, right? Because it's not, the assumption here is that these people are going to be calling in from home and touching base once in a while. And it's taking the whole idea of what Zoom and WebEx created to the next level. But that being said, I enjoy having a nice 3-hour dinner with a customer and a nice $100 cab with a 14-ounce ribeye as much as the next guy, right? And
as we all do.
I think
how business gets done a lot of times, and I have no issues with it. Right? Yeah.
Right. I think going off of what Mo said, the biggest thing that is missing is abuse. Okay, we all talk about the wonders and how we as professionals can leverage working from home. And I can tell you, when I work from home, I actually work more, because you're a step away. I can go have dinner. I come back. I want to get those few emails. However, when we talk about the general population of a lot of businesses, contact centers an easy one to hit. How do I prevent abuse? How do I get that agent that swears they have a connectivity problem, swears they have one-way audio, swears that they have issues? Okay, now I can start doing call record. Well, that's a huge expense to validate and verify. How do I ensure the fact that, forget about a contact center agent, think of any vertical. How do I ensure they're actually working? I'm paying for them. Well, now do I have to call them all the time? Do I got to make sure they're doing it? Do I have to have extra calls that take away my supervisor's times? Again, there's a huge amount of abuse. Now, let's talk about the abuse being blamed on technology. I have a bad internet connection. How do I validate that? How do I report on that? Well, now all of a sudden we start getting into, again, for voice over IP, RTCP or RTCP XR. What was their connection speed? All those things. Again, those things cannot be missed. Okay. We have to be able to, I agree with all of you, change our management paradigm, because you can't manage the same way. You have to change how you view and look and approve or disapprove abuse. Okay. And then last but not least is a sense of family culture. Let's not forget that. I work with people here in Maryland. I've worked with them for 14 years. We work well together because we are a family. We hang out with each other. We go to lunch. We've sweat and bled together. All of a sudden, when we all work from home, and I've done this, I've worked at other divisions within the company and worked on other accounts where I just get on the phone when there's a problem and we hang up. Again, there's something lost there, that sense of family, that sense of teamwork, that loyalty. And it's much easier to quit your job and go to a competitor when you don't have that loyalty to your coworkers. So again, those are all things, we're not going to fix those, but we have to keep those in mind when we start attacking this larger teleworking problem.
Yeah. Well, listen, folks, I think I'm gonna.
Sorry, just one thing.
Okay, go ahead,
I think some of the comments that we're getting on there is, from David, your side of things on the sales, and we haven't talked about your aspect, but people are saying in the chat that actually selling to organizations and fostering relationships and building relationships when you're in the selling mode is becoming harder. And I'm just curious, actually, for the two Daves who are in sales, how you guys, dealing with not being able to actually see customers face to face, or are you just doing that? I mean, you're in Maryland now, so I guess you are taking those steps.
Dave, you go. Let me just give you my opinion on it. And Dave, it is a different dynamic. It's relearning how to engage and create, I'll call it a culture of trust with your customers. So in the old days, I was really, you'd have calls, but they were not really in depth. You made that deep connection when you met with them. You broke bread. You had those meetings, right? So once a month, I was over in the West Coast and doing all the big meetings, touching base, breaking bread. All of a sudden, that didn't exist anymore. So you had to find new ways to sort of touch base and create trust. Yes, it was very difficult because being on a bunch of Zoom calls over and over where everyone's schedule is all fried, it is a challenge. But what you're seeing is this whole dynamic of creating relevant engagement through social interactions, through social media, writing articles, connecting with people on topics that you both share. And when we do video meetings, they aren't just here are the points, here's what we cover, see you, goodbye. You actually connect. You have a deeper engagement over those video sessions. In fact, video has become, I bring up this point, my session before COVID, when I do a video session, no one's video was on. It was just a voice call just to make sure we reported. What you've seen in the last 2 years is very few people don't have their video on because they want to show that they're engaged and they want to communicate with you. When the video is not on, you have not created an engagement. That guide is not interested in connecting with you. So it's a challenge, but technology has helped us, but it's not the solution. It's just a tool to make sure that we realign. It's again, realigning the management skill, how you're going to now re-deal with people. I don't know, Dave, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you asked this because this is really, I think, where Subspace is a real critical input into what makes sales successful in this virtual environment. When I'm in a room with someone, I control the environment. They can't leave. I'm there. I'm going to make my case. If I'm in a virtual environment and I'm starting to get packet loss, jitter, someone's talking in the background, I'm ready to go up the wall because the environment is no longer intimate. I'm dealing with other extraneous factors. Again, I look at Joe. Joe has set up his environment. This is who Joe is, and he can become intimate with his caller, right? With the person he's dealing with. Without the right technology to deliver this, all that focus changes to the problem and not the message.
Right.
And I think that's critical. Now, if I could just make one more point and dovetailing off what Mike said, we have a team of people that have to deal with, and I'm sure Michael would agree with me on this, when he gets complaints about the environment doesn't work. My people are having challenges, right? The first thing he's going to go to is it a problem with our equipment? Is it a problem with our cloud? Is it a problem with the carrier? All of those things are drawing our resources, and we have conference calls around the clock trying to troubleshoot those issues, all non-productive, when in the end we know it's a network issue. And we have to prove that it's not a network issue first before anyone will focus on the network. With Subspace, we get around that. We can already show them where the issue is, and we can already remediate in advance. So long way of answering your question, but it's critical. It's critical.
I also think, just to give another plug to Mo and to Davide at Subspace and the fine folks there, we're working on the VPN problem. You can't, the VPN plus cloud is not the answer. We need to redefine how you establish a secure communication. And then Subspace has the ability to detect the original source of the viewer so that we can then put our workloads in the closest cloud instance, because we're in the low latency business, and we could do this in real time, and Google does not do that for us, right? the ability for us not just to pick the best path for a packet to go through, which is something obviously Subspace does very well, but even before that, to say, oh, you've logged on and you happen to be in Singapore. Well, you know what? We're going to home you into the Singapore GCP instance and then, you know, connect back in. We're not going to bring you back into May West or into Google Central, right? Where we host our main service. But I'm really excited about the future, and I'm really, really excited about this world where we're going to do both. And this work-life balance that we've been talking about all our lives, and I'm 100% with you guys on, you know, we used to call it the work some more from home office, right? When we first got our Avaya phones, when I used to work at Avaya, and I had my my phone would ring on my home desk. Like you end up, you have to balance that. But the ability for me to end this call and take my dog for an hour walk because I live on the coast, and that keeps me sane, right? And the ability for us to balance that, this is hopefully what we're offering our employees. And then we're more productive, and then we can have a nice life, and we can all aspire, like Mo, to go to the Caribbean every 3 months.
So guys, listen, I want to thank you. I think we basically have come to our hour end, and this is my first one, so obviously I'm late as usual, but this was a great conversation, and it was really fostered a lot of dialogue in the chat. So I just want to close up, maybe some closing thoughts from each of you. Joe, I think you gave us your closing thoughts, so I'm going to skip you.
I'm good.
And I'm going to go to Colin, Dave, Mike, and Mo. Maybe you guys can just give me your closing thoughts before we wrap it up.
Sounds good. Well, we're short on time, so, you know, I'll keep it short, sweet. It's a crazy new world, and we have to embrace this change. And you know, I think Subspace is going to bring that change.
Awesome, Dave and Mike. Closing thoughts.
My big thing is conference calls and these seem to be all about business. We have to make time within the conference calls to make them more personable, to build that sense of team and family. I think that's something very lacking. And I hope that's what matures out of the teleworking solution.
My input would be what we make look very casual here and very informal is not. Your company, your organization must have a formal teleworking strategy, a plan.
I agree.
Without all of the elements of management, technology, metrics, image, all of those pieces, you have to have a strategy or you will fail.
Awesome. Michael.
Yeah, well said, guys. Agree with everything you said. I heard this a long time ago from somebody else. This is not my statement, but the statement is that, you know, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? And you guys have probably heard that before, right? You know, we're trying to create this great strategy and this go-to-market plan and everything else. But if our culture isn't where it needs to be, nothing else matters. That culture we're trying to create is supported by a really solid technology solution that enables conversations like this. Dave, I agree 100% with what you said. We got to get that right. And then the rest of it kind of follows suit.
It's a great point. I agree with that. Culture eats strategy. It's, you know, you can't.
It's not mine,
but you don't have the culture, but it's good.
I'm not claiming it, but it's absolutely true, man.
Sure. Mo, I'm going to leave the sort of pinnacle at the end. Our Chief Product Officer, Mo, what are your final thoughts on the topic today?
You know, on the product side, as I said, I'm excited to see what innovative new product solutions people come up with to solve these sorts of things. But to echo everyone else's, I mean, culture is really important. I think most people have focused on their own businesses from a commercial standpoint, but they don't realize that they're one of the biggest expenses is employees. So you have to focus on that culture and build a strategy. So whatever you build, it's not about a technology strategy. It's about actually how people can work and be effective, and how they can feel protected and trusting of their colleagues and their environments and customers. How do you build all of those elements that you've talked about? I think that all has to go as part of the strategy for a successful work from home model. And I do think it's here to stay. I mean, I think everybody likes it. We're all working from home, and we all sort of like working from home, or the freedom of working from home. But I think we'd also embrace, you know, the opportunity to interact face to face with our colleagues every once in a while. I think that's a nice thing. What is that rhythm? Whether it's once a month, once a quarter, it'll be different for every company. But I think that has to be also part of a strategy.
Awesome. Well said. And we'll wrap it up on there. Again, I want to thank all our guests for such a great, lively conversation. I think we really only covered the surface. There were so many other elements I wanted to get into, but you guys were so dynamic and colorful. We really didn't get to it, but we'll do a wrap up. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and look for our, again, quarterly ongoing podcast from Subspace. And I thank you again, and I thank my guests. I appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.
All right.
Hey,
Yeah, I can hear you.
I think that went okay.
Did we record? I
We
think so.
did.
Okay, good. This is just you and